Good evening. Welcome to our Literary Café. My name is Helen Liu and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Carey Library. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Carey Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. The Literary Café was created by the Foundation and the library is pleased to collaborate with the Foundation and Marjan Kamali on this series. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone over. Or if you're joining us on Zoom, please submit your questions to the Q&A. Books by our authors are available for purchase with Brian from Maxima in the back of the room. Our authors will be happy to sign your books after the program. Now I'd like to introduce our host. Marjan Kamali is the award-winning author of The Stationery Shop, national and international bestseller, and Together Tea, a Massachusetts Book Award finalist. She is a 2022 recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship. Marjan's novels are published in translation in more than 25 languages. Her essays have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Literary Hub, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. Marjan holds a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley, a Master of Business Administration from Columbia University, and a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from New York University. Born in Turkey to Iranian parents, she spent her childhood in Turkey, Iran, Germany, Kenya, and the US. Marjan is currently a scholar in residence at the Women's Studies Research Center at Brandeis University. Her latest novel, The Lion Women of Tehran, comes out in July 2024. Please join me in welcoming Marjan.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you to the folks joining us virtually on Zoom. This is a very special Carey Library Literary Cafe. We're excited to be celebrating Carybokaflod, which is based on an Icelandic tradition where during the holiday season, all you do is you give your loved ones books and you receive books and you sit together and read books, which to me sounds like the most perfect holiday. So this is the second year that Carey Library is doing our own version of this Icelandic tradition, which I believe is called Jólabókaflóð in Iceland. And it's just so lovely that it all worked out. And tonight we have two very wonderful authors with us, Adrienne Brodeur and Nancy Crochiere, and I'm very excited to introduce them to you. But before I do, the teacher in me has to tell you a little bit about how our class is going to run tonight. So I'm going to introduce our lovely authors. I'm going to give each one of them a chance to tell you a little bit about their novels, to read a short passage from their books, and then I will have the pleasure of asking them everything I want to ask them. There's a lot on my list. And then I will open it up to Q&A from all of you, and we will do all of this in an hour. And you can have your hot chocolate and cookies and tea. So without further ado, it is such a delight to have Adrienne here. Adrienne Brodeur is the author of the novel Little Monsters, which we will be discussing tonight, and the memoir Wild Game, My Mother, Her Lover, and Me, which was described by the New York Times Book Review as exquisite and harrowing, beautifully written. They said that you can sort of gobble it all up in one sitting, and I can attest to that. Wild Game's film rights were bought with Nick Hornby attached to adapt it to the screen. Adrienne has spent the past 2 decades of her professional life in the literary world, discovering voices, cultivating talent, and working to amplify underrepresented writers. Her publishing career began with founding the fiction magazine, Zoetrope All Story, with filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, where she served as editor-in-chief from 1996 to 2002. The magazine has won the prestigious National Magazine Award for Best Fiction 4 times. In 2005, she became an editor at Harcourt, later Houghton Mifflin Books, where she acquired and edited literary fiction and memoir. And in 2013, she became the creative director and later executive director of Aspen Words, a literary arts nonprofit and program of the Aspen Institute. And in 2017, she launched the Aspen Words Literary Prize, an annual award for an influential work of fiction that illuminates a vital contemporary issue and demonstrates the transformative power of literature on thought and culture. Adrienne splits her time between Cambridge and Cape Cod, where she lives with her husband and children. So please join me in welcoming Adrienne here tonight. It's an honor to have you. And I'm going to also introduce Nancy and then turn the mics over to them. So Nancy, some of you might know Nancy Crochiere from her humor column about family life from Massachusetts newspapers, which she wrote for 13 years. Her collection of those columns, titled The Mother Lode, was a finalist for Forward Review's Book of the Year in Humor and the Independent Publishers of New England 2014 Book Award. A graduate of Middlebury College, she earned a master's degree in English Language and Literature from the University of Minnesota, is an alumni of Brook Street's Novel Incubator Program, and she worked as a development editor for various educational publishers. Her essays have appeared in the Boston Globe, Writer's Digest, and WBOR's Cognoscenti blog. She began her fiction career when her daughters were young by penning creative notes to excuse their tardiness at school. That's how you know you're a writer. Because I feel like I also exaggerated with those notes. With her girls now grown, she lives north of Boston with her husband, a lawyer and marathoner, and a few houseplants that could use more attention. And Graceland is her first novel, and we're glad that you're neglecting her houseplants because your writing is benefiting. So thank you, Nancy, for being here. So I'd love to start the evening with Adrienne, you telling us a little bit about Little Monsters, and then maybe sharing a passage from it for us.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming. I've been off book tour for a couple months, and all of a sudden I thought I'm a little rusty of describing the book, so I was looking to see what was on the flap, and I actually think we can do better. But it is a novel about sibling secrets and the seductive beauty of Cape Cod. In any case, Little Monsters is set in 2016 and is obviously set on Cape Cod, and it follows a very tight family unit, which is comprised of a father and his 2 adult children. And so at the opening of the novel, which takes place over the summer, everything seems to be going so well for this group of characters, and each of them has something sort of very big at stake. Adam Gardner is the patriarch. He is about to turn 70. He's very involved and consumed by his relevancy. He's a famous whale scientist, marine biologist, who is on the brink of making this epic new scientific breakthrough around whale communication, and one that will ensure his sort of legacy, which is what's so important to him. His adult son, Ken, who's 41, has just sealed a real estate deal that's catapulted him into a new stratosphere of wealth. And the big plus there is that it is enabling him to run for Congress, which is his dream. And the daughter, Abby, 38 years old, has kind of finally found her voice as an artist, and has, we as the reader know that she's about to be discovered in a big way. So the whole sort of narrative thrust of the novel moves towards Adam's 70th birthday. And as I said, you think everything's going swimmingly, and but everything is not as it seems, as life has it. So I thought I'd just read from the beginning of the book. The book is told in alternating perspectives. The opening chapter is from Adam's perspective, and he's the one who's about to turn 70, thinks he's on the brink of a major discovery. And the only other thing you need to know about Adam is he has bipolar disorder, and he is entering a manic phase. I'm not going to start at the very, very beginning, but a couple pages in, and I'm only going to read about a page and a half. Got to find the line in my progressive glasses to get this just right. Okay, here we go. To his credit, at the onset of this latest bout of insomnia, Adam followed protocol and made an appointment at the clinic in Hyannis, knowing full well what to expect. A blood draw, a barrage of questions, an adjustment of medication. What he hadn't expected was that the doctor who'd been treating him for the last 3 decades had retired. Why Dr. Peabody hadn't bothered to inform him directly was beyond him. 30 years was, well, a very long time. Adam pointed out the oversight to the front desk clerk, a busty young woman with blue fingernails who assured him an email had been sent to all patients the previous month. Had he thought to check his junk folder, she asked, clicking together her talons. Adam started to answer, but held his tongue. Who but an idiot would bother to check something called a junk folder? He followed her down the hall to the exam room, still puzzling over why his longtime doctor, at least 5 years his junior, would have retired. To do what? In Peabody's place, a kid half Adam's age, outfitted in tight pants and alarmingly bright orange socks, strode into the exam room. Was it too much to ask that the person evaluating his mental state have at least one gray hair on his head? The new doctor acknowledged Adam only cursorily, opting to study his electronic patient chart first. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was the doctor's lecture on sleep hygiene. For the love of God, why not just call a thing, passed away, big bone? What was so wrong with dead and fat? Euphemisms were tools of the feeble-minded. Hygiene brought to mind feminine products, something Adam did not wish to contemplate. But that led him to think about parts of the female anatomy he did like to contemplate. Stay focused, Adam reminded himself. He took notice of the boy's weak chin. I don't think we've had the pleasure of a proper introduction, Adam said, cutting the lecture short. I'm Dr. Gardner. In his lifetime, Adam Gardner, PhD, had had an acclaimed career as a research scientist for the Cape Cod Institute of Oceanography, CCIO to those in the know. His glory days were in the late 1970s when, as a young scientist, he was part of a team that disproved once and for all the notion that life could be sustained only by a photosynthesis-based food chain. In the pitch-black depths of the Pacific Ocean north of the Galapagos Islands, they'd encountered evidence in the form of foot-long clams, giant red tube worms, and spiny white crabs that even in darkness there was life. Adam and his team discovered and named more than 24 species. In the decades that followed those early successes, he'd become one of the foremost experts on cetacean biology, studying the population dynamics and communication of humpback whales. Beyond these professional accomplishments, he was a Vietnam veteran who had single-handedly raised his 2 children after his beloved first wife, Emily, died suddenly at the age of 30. In short, he wasn't about to let some kid outrank him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love Adam's voice. We're very different, but I kind of feel we're the same person in many ways. And after I read that beginning of your book, Adrienne, I checked my junk folder. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing. And actually there were some important things in there. So,
Like my little PSA, apparently.
yes, you're helping people in very many different ways. But thank you for that. And Nancy, I'm gonna hand the mic to you. The metaphorical
mic
yeah.
for your hand. Thank you again for coming, everyone. Yeah. So Graceland is the story of a single mom who is forced to chase her Elvis-obsessed mother and her pink-haired teenage daughter to Memphis to stop them from revealing a secret. So it's a comic, multi-generational grandmother, mother, daughter road trip chase to Memphis. And it starts with the grandmother. Olivia Grant is a washed-up soap opera star. She played a villainess in a long-running soap opera for 45 years, and now she's retired. The soap's been canceled. She's pushing 80, and she's on oxygen with very bad COPD. So Olivia's thinking about what she wants to do with the time that she has left, and there's one thing that she very much wants to do. All her life, Olivia has been obsessed with Elvis. And before she dies, she wants to go to Graceland one last time. There are reasons behind this, but you have to read the book to find them out. In order to get to Graceland, because of her health issues, she needs the help of her daughter, Hope. And Hope would love nothing more than to help her mother out. She's all her life longed to please her flamboyant soap star mother. And but this is the one thing that she can't do for her mother, because Hope left Memphis, her hometown, some years back with a secret and a promise never to return. So Olivia Grant, who has never learned the word no, then just goes around her daughter and basically cons Hope's pink-haired teenage activist daughter Dylan into driving her to Memphis by telling Dylan that in Memphis she can get something that she's always wanted, which is more information about her mystery father. So I mean, after Olivia and Dylan take off together in a beat-up 1998 Volkswagen Beetle, Hope has no choice but to follow them and try to stop them, because she knows that if they make it to Memphis and reveal her secrets, it'll be disastrous for the family. So that is, sounds like the whole book. It's not, it's just the lead up. It's just this is where we start in this fast-paced novel. So I'm going to just read 2 pages from just the very start of the book, which sets up the dynamic between Hope and Olivia. So the chapter, like Adrienne's book, the book is told in different points of view. It's told from the point of view of each of the 3 women, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. So this is Hope, the daughter, the single mom, chapter 1. 2 days before my mother and daughter disappeared, my mother did something entirely out of character. She asked for my help. She took her time, of course. Say what you want about my mother, the woman won't be rushed. Even after I'd rinsed our lunch plates and tucked the leftover pad thai into her fridge, she refused to explain the message she'd left at my office saying she needed to see me urgently. It wasn't until I'd sunk deep into her overstuffed sofa and she'd handed me a sloshing cup of tea that I fully appreciated her genius. My only escape would be to sip my way out. Finally, though, my mother seemed to be coming to the point. I could tell because she'd moved toward the window. My mother never plays a scene without using light and shadow to her advantage. If you Google old episodes of The Light Within, you'll notice how before delivering a key line, she lifts her chin and cocks her head toward the light. For years, my father and I debated whether this movement was instinctive or if she blocked it out in advance. Either way, whenever Olivia Grant is about to deliver a show-stopping line, a window is invariably to her right. And so, with her signature chin lift and head tilt, my mother shared what was so urgent. Before I die, she said, I want to see Graceland again. I didn't mean to snort. Never in my 40 years had I made fun of my mother's obsession with Elvis, at least not to her face. She simply caught me off balance, and I laughed to cover my panic. Graceland? Graceland, for God's sake? Just the thought of Memphis made my stomach churn. Leave it to my mother to ask for the one thing I absolutely couldn't do. Which part do you find amusing, Hope, she asked. Graceland or my dying? Mom, I said, determined to steer the conversation away from Memphis. You're not dying. She turned, and as if on cue, the green tube connected to her oxygen dispenser caught on the edge of the coffee table, yanking the cannula from her face. I had to give her points for that one. Effective use of props. We're all dying, she said, repositioning the prongs under each nostril. I'm just doing it faster than the average 79-year-old. With the afternoon sun backlighting her profile, my mother was still stunning. Snow white hair pulled back into a chignon, her nose long and thin, with just a hint of distinctive crookedness. I started to protest, but she waved me off. No, this isn't self-pity. I'm explaining why we need to do this Memphis trip soon. Right away, in fact. I bent forward and gulped the tea, scalding my mouth. I needed to end this conversation, quickly, decisively, for all time. My mother didn't realize what she was asking.
I love it, and so it begins. I have to say, there were parts of your book, Nancy, where I like to write as I read in the book, which is controversial, I know. But so many parts I wrote LOL, just because there were just some great parts.
Well, that's a good response. Thank
Yeah.
you. I like that response.
Yes. So after my own death, when my children inherit these books, they'll get to read all the thoughts.
Hopefully they'll LOL.
Well, hopefully they'll read them. Hopefully they'll read
They
them.
probably won't know what that means by then.
Yeah.
It'll be sad.
Well, actually, I'd like to set the table with that question because we're in a library tonight, and I've noticed when I get together with friends as of late, we talk a lot about the shows people are watching. It's like, oh, have you seen this? We finished that. Oh, those episodes ended. Now we feel so bereft. We need to start a new show. And then every now and then I'll say, so what have you guys been reading? And then, they're like, we don't really have time to read. And I'll say, yeah, but we just discussed the 2,000 shows you watched. So I want to ask both of you about your reading habits. Yeah, what's a good show you watch? I want to ask you about your reading habits, because I do think in this day and age, there's so much competing for our attention. Forget the shows, just life, the speed of life, and social media, the news. So I'm curious, I am pretty sure that both of you were readers as kids, most writers are. That's how the cake is baked. Can you talk to me a little bit about your reading habits of yore and how you keep it up today? I'll call on you. Yes, Adrienne.
I would be happy to. I was actually going to start by saying I wasn't one of the kids with the flashlight under the blanket. And I think part of that is because both my parents were writers, and it was like the last thing I wanted to do. I mean, I read a lot, but I just wasn't, all I hear is that story. But really, for me, it was when I graduated from college. I was off in California, embarking on a career in politics and public policy with the intention of saving the world. And my father had gotten married again to this incredible woman who owned an independent bookstore in San Diego called Bookworks. And she was so intuitive, and she just started pressing novels into my hands. I just remember this so well. And I think she, could see, even if I couldn't at the moment, that I was a white hot mess. And so she was handing me these great books that, I truly read to figure things out, because it's such an act of empathy when you're lost in a book, because you are no longer Adrienne Brodeur from Cambridge and Cape Cod. You are in another land, in another time, and all those things, and it's so wonderful. So I became consumed by reading, really, in the always had one going. And then from there, I noticed that the policy journals on my bedside were going down, while the literary journals and the books were going up, and I realized I had to make a complete change. All that to say, I read all the time. I read different things depending on what I'm writing and what's going on with my other job, which is running a literary organization. So right now, this literary prize we have each year, the long list was just announced. So there are 14 novels that I am trying to tear through, although I'm not a judge, but I want to keep up with the judges as they're reading. And these are really intense novels. They're weighed on both their enduring literary value as well as their ability to shine a spotlight on a social issue. So things like Jesmyn Ward's new book, I'm going to forget all these titles, Kwame Nana Adichie, something or other. It's The Chain Gang. There are just so many beautiful books. Yellowface was on there. So that's what I'm doing now. And generally, after I read these books, which happens every fall, I mean, I could just go for a bodice ripper. It's so intense after that. I just want like something really light, really just tear me through, a mystery, something. I read a lot of poetry as I'm writing. Mary Oliver is one of my go-tos and favorite. But that's just for the language, to get me in the head as I'm writing. I'm not someone who avoids, I don't read novels when I write a novel, or I don't read memoir. I read a mix at all times. And we were talking before getting up here, I mean, we both like to listen a lot because you can do that in cars, on trains, as you're cooking dinner for people, folding socks, all the delights that make up our less glamorous lives.
Yes, I do. I listen to a lot of books on audiobook because, as Adrienne says, there's nothing that can get me to do the laundry and fold, clean out the dishwasher, empty the dishwasher faster than being able to listen to a book while I do it. The stuff on my nightstand gets a sort of slower read because there's only, I read before I go to sleep. I don't know about, people are nodding, yes. So excited to go to bed, so excited to read 10 pages. But in terms of what I read, if that's what you're, I mean, I do follow all the, the Booker Prizes, the Pulitzer Prize, the books that are out. I love Barbara Kingsolver, I love, Lily King, we were talking about earlier. I love, gosh, okay, so names are going. I also do like stuff on the lighter side. So I loved books like Bonnie Garmus's Lessons in Chemistry. Everybody's read that, right? Gabrielle Zevin's Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow. Not that that was real light, but
I was gonna say, I didn't think that was so light.
yeah. I was really a big fan of her book, The Storied Life of A.J. Figgery, which was a little bit more humorous, even though it had some serious issues, which is, the way I was thinking about things when I was writing Graceland. So those are my two kind of book club fiction and literary fiction.
Yeah, and I think, some writers, as you were mentioning, Adrienne, they shy away from reading books that are similar to the book they're writing when they're writing that book because they don't want it to seep into their work. They're worried that they might be too influenced by it, but other writers are happy to read books in the same genre and do so very intentionally. I think reading is sort of, we pay attention to what we eat. And in the same way, we have a reading diet, and it can be a good variety. I'm a big fan of variety, right? So you have the literary fiction every now and then, a good bodice ripper.
Veggies and dessert, man.
Yeah, you got your junk food, you got your, So I think the key is, though, most writers read tremendously. And I loved what you said about reading poetry, too, because a lot of writers read poetry. I highly recommend reading a little bit of poetry every morning. I know I'm from another age. I just highly recommend this. I know we have a few budding writers in the audience, so one more question on this whole sort of how we live our lives daily in order to write these books. And that question has to do with the lives you used to lead, because you both used to write very different kinds of things. Nancy, I know you wrote the humor column for many years, and Adrienne, Wild Game was memoir, which is a whole different kettle of fish. So maybe tell us about that transition to writing fiction and how different it feels to write fiction than what you were writing before.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Wild Game, in a lot of ways, was the book I had to write. It was the story of a very complicated relationship I had with my mother, and it was wonderful to write it, and very challenging and emotionally complicated and all those things. But I will say the major difference between writing memoir and writing fiction is, it's sort of obvious. With memoir, you know the point of view, you know the characters, and you know the story. And granted, there is still a lot of work to be done to shape and craft a narrative out of the block that is the marble of your life. I mean, it is a lot to do, but you have this huge advantage. Whereas, of course, with fiction, absolutely everything is up for grabs. Anything can happen on any page the whole time. I mean, it's really for, if you have trouble making decisions, stay away from fiction. I mean, it's really just mind-boggling. And you're sort of writing, it's the definition of flying the plane while building it. You're writing into the mystery, hoping, I feel like, at least in my fiction, I'm hoping to touch some larger truths and mystery, and you're kind of, I don't know, it's an incredible process of sort of trusting the process. And I like to say there is a logic to your subconscious, because of course you can't hold the whole book. And I feel like, I'm not an outliner, but I do have an idea of where I'm going. I recently listened to a podcast that was interviewing, the name is escaping me right, Alice Elliott Dark on her new book, and she talked about writing 1,700 pages before finding sort of the story. I mean, shoot me. That would be so.
There are people who do that. I have a friend who writes like 100-page outline. I'm like, well, did you write the book then?
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
yeah.
I mean, same thing. So, but I feel like there's this sort of magic of you're like herding ideas or sheep or whatever it is, and you need to know the direction, but you also need to be willing to follow one of them in a different direction. And it's just, it's a crazy, extraordinary process, and I highly recommend it. It's deeply satisfying to get the right words when you're, it's a lot harder than you think to sort of translate all the great ideas up here actually into those little black and white things on a page. But when you do it, it's a good feeling. On to you, Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy, how do you do that?
How do you do it?
It's interesting because I've had that question before, like, well, what's different about, writing the column versus writing a novel? And at first the question took me by surprise. I was like, it was longer. It was a lot longer. I think it was very much in the vein of when I wrote my column. It was a modern day and updated Irma Bombeck kind of. It was about our life. It was about things that happened with my kids, with my husband, the whole. I cracked up with the Barbie movie that came out earlier in this year because, oh my gosh, that was such a thing with my daughters. And, I just remember writing about all the Barbies that we had. There was, nurse practitioner Barbie and electrician Barbie and, pediatrician Barbie and streetwalker Barbie and just, the bins that we had. And I opened them up one day and there were more little baby, was it Chrissy? I don't know, the little babies than I had ever remembered. I was like, what have you Barbies and Ken's been doing in here? Anyway, so that was the column. It was about our life. It was about, what happened with my kids, what happened with my husband, our battles over the thermostat, our battles over the TV remote, things like that. So it was all, I made fun of it, but it was fact-based. So writing a novel, for a long time, I listened to the people who were like, write what you know, write what you know. And finally I heard somebody that said, you know what, write what you don't know. Then that's gonna be a lot more fun. And I thought, yes, that's what I wanna do. I wanna write what I don't know. So, I mean, Graceland is just entirely, there's always something of us, right? And I mean, there's always, we put ourselves into the characters. But for me, I had never been to Memphis before I wrote Graceland. I had always, listened to Elvis music, but I hadn't been a huge fan. So the researching and that went into that stuff, and the imagination that went into just developing people who were, you know, nothing like anybody I had known exactly. That was sort of the joy for me.
Yeah, I love what you said about that, because I think it's almost, I mean, it's right what you don't know, but also right what fascinates you. Like, that's why I chose a marine biologist, not because I, you know, or bipolar disorder, or, you know, right, give your characters things that you're really interested in studying and pursuing. You're gonna be at this a while,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, you better like it.
No accountants. Sorry,
Gonna
I
be-
was an accountant.
Added a little while, just a wee bit, you're gonna be with these characters, like years on end.
And they're gonna talk to you even after you're done.
Yes,
So,
you'll talk about
And
them
you'll talk about them
forevermore.
forever.
Like
yeah.
tonight, I'm gonna ask you about these characters that, you know, I think that's so true. And when I was reading your book, Nancy, there was a part of me that was like, is she an Elvis fan? Did she go to Graceland? She sure knows a lot about Elvis. And then, you know, that went away, that evaporated after the first few chapters because I was with Olivia. That's who I was with. Nancy was not in the room. And that's the mark of a great writer. I was with Olivia, I was in her head. There's so many similarities between your two books. And I wish I could say I planned it, didn't plan it, just kismet. Like I said, this book, and then magically. They're both set in 2016. This fraught time politically, right before the election, your main characters think that Hillary Clinton is going to be president. Oh well, that didn't happen. So I'm curious what made you think of placing it in 2016, because I think the more time passes, the more that's going to become a hallmark time. And already reading both your books, the summer of 2016 felt historic.
you want me to go first?
You know, I set my book in 2016 because I started writing around 2015, and I had it all figured out how old Olivia would have had to have been. Olivia, as a great soap star, has a date with Elvis, and that was part of my research that I did. You know, when she could have had this date with Elvis. And I wanted, you know, I had to have everything work out such that, you know, she'd have a granddaughter who was 16. And so that was, in the end, how I ended up with, in part, 2016, but then the political, the implications of what happened politically in that year ended up inserting themselves and actually becoming sort of a part of the drama. And I'm not going to say more because I don't want to, you know, give away plot points.
Yeah, no spoilers, but it certainly adds to the tension.
Yeah. I chose 2016 before the election very intentionally because I simply remember that summer so specifically in a way that, you know, ask me about 2012 or 13 or 14 and I don't, but I remember the collective uneasiness that was going on then, the choices, the political choices, which made lots of people uncomfortable for different reasons. You know, I had to look up a lot of the timeline because I wasn't sure, you know, the Me Too movement happened a little after that, but certainly we were becoming, you know, it was very much on everyone's mind and certainly on my character's mind, but I also really like the subversive idea of the reader always knowing so much more than the characters do. And so I ended it before the end of the year, before the election, I mean, with, you know, these characters thinking the world is going in one direction and we all knowing it was going in another. But I found it a really fascinating time. I also liked the idea of sort of having this, you know, the country was about to go through this political implosion while this family is having their own implosion, so it was just sort of a nice mirror.
Yeah, and it's kind of like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic when you read books set before the pandemic and there's certain things taking place and you're like, oh, that's nice, because that's not gonna be happening in 2 years, you know. But with 2016, it's the same thing before the election, when we're reading some of the thoughts that are going on. Like you said, the reader is a few steps ahead of the characters, and there's this sense of they are on the cusp of something that they can't even imagine, especially the ones who, like I'm thinking of Tessa, the young 12-and-a-half-year-old in the book, one of the 12-and-a-half-year-olds who, she's a twin, who has so much verve and passion and is politically engaged. And, you know, there's a part of me that when she came on the page, I was worried for her, because I knew what was to come.
Well, but her big role was also to keep, you know, as all teenagers do, to keep their parents in line, to keep them in check.
Yes. Well, you know, speaking of keeping parents in line, there were another very strange similarity between both your books is you have a young woman who is here on this earth as a result of a one-night stand in both books. And you have this young woman deeply wanting to connect with her biological father, and then once learning more about the biological father, maybe having doubts about that decision. Secrets, so many secrets. Just when I thought there couldn't be one more secret, there was another secret. And that's what we love as authors, we love secrets. Everybody has them. Everybody, it's the elephant in the room in all of these family situations. I'm curious how the secrets unfolded for you. Did the secrets come first before the characters were formed? Or did the secrets sort of multiply as you wrote?
Definitely a bit of each. I mean, there was a lot of multiplying secrets, but, you know, and I don't know if any of you have read my memoir, Wild Game, but it is all about family secrets, and my family has more than their fair share. And one of the things I was interested in, because both my parents, you know, separately, both of them had half-siblings that they didn't know about. So I've always been really curious about that, both from the perspective, I've been on the inside of a family where someone from the outside is like, hey, you know, I'm part of this. But I've never been the person, at least not that I know of yet, I should knock something giving my family, but I have not, you know, discovered that I am actually part of another family that I didn't know. And so I was really interested in that point of view idea behind it, of this woman orbiting this family, trying to figure out if she wanted in or not. And what I really loved about the Steph character in the end was, I think we're all born into families and they have these unspoken rules that we all, you know, follow because we don't know. I mean, this is just you only get one childhood, you're in this thing. And what I loved about Steph, and what I wasn't expecting when I started this book, was she decided she wanted to pick and choose who she wanted in her family, and she made some decisions and sort of kind of said, we don't have to do that. So that was interesting.
That was so empowering. So empowering, the decisions she made. And again, no spoilers, but she ended up deciding who she would wish to interact with. Imagine that. Imagine if we could do that.
Yeah. I did spend some time imagining it. That'd be nice.
It's like, not you, but you.
Yeah.
Not you, but yeah. Very empowering. Nancy, you also have just this, that's like the central core of the plot, this
Secrets.
yes, secrets, and also the secret of the father who just lots of misunderstandings is how I'll put it. Lots of miscommunication.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I started by knowing that Hope was, had a lot of secrets. I mean, that was definitely the fact that she has one big secret that she's not somebody who's actually very good at keeping secrets or at lying. It's just not her personality. But she's had to keep this secret, and she's had to lie to her daughter for 16 years, basically, and that's been really hard. She's kind of bad at it, and her daughter at 16 has kind of figured out something's not right. You know, my mother's not telling me the whole story. My mother, and her daughter is pissed. I mean, her daughter is very, very angry that her mother's, been keeping stuff from her. So yes, her daughter's now very interested in finding out more about this mystery father that her mother has told her, lived in a yurt up in Alaska, and we couldn't be in contact with him, and then he died, and she's figured out all this is a little bit of baloney. So there were those secrets, but I think also secrets do emerge as we continue to write, because we write characters and we know certain things about them. We know that, but what we have to find, I think, as you start writing into it, is, well, I knew this about Olivia, but why was this so about Olivia? Olivia, might have a very strong feeling about the end of life, but where did that come from? What happened? What was in her past that made that come out? So I think we do happen upon more secrets ourselves as the author.
Okay, well, that brings me to the question of my last question before I open it up to you guys. Death and dying, end of life. We have to discuss it. I think Margaret Atwood said every novel is really about death. And in both these books, you have characters who, for example, Adam and Olivia, they're facing their own mortality, and it's not death that they're afraid of so much as decline. And it's not that they're worried about dying, but they're worried about withering away. And they're worried about losing their own functions, and worse, having their family members see them in this withered state. And I'm gonna read, actually, Nancy, in Graceland, you have this great quote that I'm gonna try and find and read, and you say that, well, I can't find it right now, so you're just gonna have to buy the book and find it yourself. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there, but let me read the death passage that I marked up from Adrienne's book, because they both sort of echo each other in very strange ways. Adam, he talks a lot about his depression and facing death, and then there's this beautiful passage where, he's a marine biologist. He has this shell that he's loved since he was a child. And you write, to stare into the spiral of a shell was to see the swirl of a galaxy, the logarithmic spiral of life itself, the intertwined miracle of art and science. He pressed it to the side of his head and listened to its voice, echoing deep time and truth, and imagined the boy, that younger and long-gone version of himself, doing the same. And with the conch against both of their ears, Adam drifted off to the soft happiness of sleep, eavesdropping on an ancient dialogue between mathematics and magic, between life and death. Beautifully written. And I just wanted, just before we open it up to the audience Q&A, if you could both touch upon this idea of your characters not being afraid of death, but more afraid of decline. In a way, they welcome death. They would prefer death.
I'll try to take that light topic on.
Yeah, just a little evening chat.
With Adam, actually, I don't know that I would fully agree that he was so worried about decline and withering so much as he's very concerned about staying relevant, which is something, I feel like I've been able to relate to at different points in my life. You have a career in one way and you're going along and you're like, oh, is this it? I'm 45, now I'm 50, whatever it is. So it doesn't have to happen when you're 70 or 80 or 90, but just these moments of kind of, I think we all start with such ambitions for ourselves as young people, and what's gonna happen and what are we gonna do and what can we accomplish. And so that was really the area that I was mostly focused on with Adam, although clearly he's contemplating his mortality for sure, and wanting to have this big success before his mortality, before he dies. But I think, that passage that you read also was after he had crashed. He'd had this manic period and so much had gone on, and then he just came crashing down. And so, he was in a depression and sort of, just generally morose. But, life and death, I mean, that is what it's all about. I remember when I handed the book in to my editor, who also edited Wild Game, I was like, I am so proud of myself. Like the mother's dead in this book. There is no mother. I got through my mother-daughter issues with Wild Game. This is a father, and she's like, okay. She reads the book and she calls me up and she's like, yeah, Adrienne, the mother haunts every character in this book. You are not over your mother.
Yeah, I have a question about mother and motherhood, believe me. But first, I'm going to have Nancy talk about the death. And actually, it's not the passage I necessarily wanted to read, but yes, Adam is afraid of slinking into oblivion, and he wants to stay relevant. And he so desperately wants to stay relevant. And Olivia too, she doesn't want to die. She wants to die on her terms. And I'm just going to read this tiny thing where she's thinking of her father. And she says, in the end, it took my father 2 years to die, paralyzed, unable to see, hear, or communicate, though the brain functions still. So it's this idea of having control over our end of life.
And that is absolutely Olivia's issue. I mean, she has a couple issues, and one of them is her fame, basically. I mean, she wants to go out on a high note. She wants to be remembered in her prime. She wants to be remembered, but she doesn't want to be. She talks about, watching the people at the Academy Awards, old actresses kind of shuffle out onto the stage on somebody's arms and kind of, smacking their lips as they, they mangle the cue cards, and that, that's not what she wants to be remembered. She'd rather be remembered as going out in her prime. She says, like Elvis, and hopes like that was his prime. Never mind, that was good, close enough. So yes, but you're right. It's not that she fears dying. She believes very much in the right for terminally ill people to choose their time, basically. She wants to choose her ending, and she wants to write a great ending for herself.
Yeah. All right, well, I could go on, but I'm gonna be true to my word and open it up. So if you have any questions to ask our lovely authors, feel free. Julie?
I have a question, Adrienne, on your decision to write the novel by shifting between the characters. Like, what compelled you to write it that way? And I have a second question, if I can plug it in. And I think Marjan touched on this, but the melding of the characters with the plot of the story, did you have in mind the characters you wanted and have in mind some of the things you wanted to happen? Or how did that all interweave?
It is a mystery. All right, so the first part of the question is why the alternating points of view. And the second part is sort of which came first, the plot or the characters a little bit? Is that what you mean?
If one did.
Okay.
And if not, how did they come together?
I think, when I start working on a project, and I'm actually at the beginning of something now, so it's, I remember, you start to pay attention to what you notice and where your mind goes sort of during those, mindless hours when you're taking a walk or something. I really believe this wonderful line of Mary Oliver's, which is pay attention, be astonished, talk about it, or tell about it, sorry, butchering Mary Oliver here. But so one of the things I very much wanted to do was truly explore the inside of a family, the inner workings of a family. And I thought that that could be best done by going into each of their heads very intensely and very closely. And what that enables you to do in this way that we all think, particularly with our family, but just in general, we all think we know why someone's giving you a look. Like, Marjan, she's nodding at me, why is she doing that right now? So I'm gonna make, but for all I know, like, she's got a stomach ache and she's doing this.
She's thinking about what to have for dinner.
Like, we never know what's going on in other people's heads, and yet we're human, so we're creating stories all the time, and these characters are creating stories to suit their needs, as we all do. And I just found that sort of a really true way that humans behave, and a fascinating way to go through the story. I couldn't precisely tell you which came first, because I feel like I had certain elements of the book. You know, I knew the setting would be the Cape, I knew the time would be 2016, I knew I wanted it to be about this family and focus on sibling rivalry, and then you kind of cling tightly to the pieces you know, and you research your characters. I mean, I think characters are a little bit like icebergs. You know, the reader sees this little top bit, and the author, you know, knows all the rest of it underneath, and you just reveal what you have to reveal. And, you know, novels are all about compression and distillation, and, you know, the one line that, you know, Adam will speak differently to his daughter than his son, than, you know, the barista, and you just have to, there's no really what comes first or next. You sort of discover it as you're writing it, and then you go back and you revise and you revise and you revise, because you really don't know all the characters well until the end of the book, because that's when you put them in all the different situations and get to know them. I mean, I don't know if is that sort of how it works with you? I feel like mine start as stick figures, and then I keep dressing them. I put more and more on them or something.
I like that, yeah. I mean, I think definitely I felt what you were saying was very true for me too, that I did start with, you know, sort of one situation, and with the characters, and the characters grew and the situations grew from that. But then after a while, you know, a plot takes shape. But I didn't start with one or the other. I didn't know the whole plot. I didn't know all the characters. I knew.
Yeah, and then you kind of hang on for dear life when anything is revealed to you. Like when I figured out that, you know, the narrative propulsion was going towards Adam's party, I was like, okay, thank God, you know, we can now set the, you know, so you get a piece, you get another piece, and you cling desperately.
Yeah, eventually you find out, okay, you figure out, I know this big thing is going to happen, so how do we get everybody there? And then what's going to happen after to everybody after?
You had to get everyone to Elvis.
I had to get everybody to Graceland. Yep.
And I had to get everyone to Wellfleet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Kimberly.
I wanted to ask about setting. That was actually a perfect segue due to my question, which is in both of your books, there are places that are so distinctive to us. Like, so many of us have our own memories of the Cape. When you say Graceland, we all have our own ideas of Elvis and what that will be like. And place plays an important role in both of your novels, and your memoir too, Adrienne. The Cape is almost a character. And I wondered about your approach to developing setting in your novels. How do you create this place that is unique to your story and your characters, knowing that your reader may also have their own ideas?
Yeah, you go. Well, with Cape Cod, I definitely did the write what I know, and I absolutely adore the Cape. And since I'm speaking to people who are from Massachusetts, I assume many of you know the Cape, but you know what I don't need to explain to you, which I do to audiences elsewhere, is like, what Provincetown is as different from Chatham as Las Vegas is from Boston. I mean, these are just each place, but I am so moved by the Cape, and particularly, I mean, I find it an interesting place because of course there are people who live there and people who summer there, and there's, you know, class differences and all that kind of thing, but the thing that moves me most is the extraordinary natural beauty, the shifting sand, the brackish air, the going over that bridge. I always have this like Pavlov's dog reaction, like I'm here, you know, my blood pressure goes down, those long walks on the beach, but also the essential fragility of that land. I mean, that sandbar is not going to be here forever. And when you look out at any estuary on Cape Cod, I mean, it just changes by the hour, by the minute. The sandbars are rising and the grass changes color in the hours of the day and the seasons. And, you know, just, I find it extraordinarily beautiful. I am going to try to write off Cape this next book. There might be a scene or two, but I'm taking it elsewhere.
But then your editor will say the Cape haunts the book.
I'll just say briefly that, that we did sort of have opposite experiences because I had, you know, I conceived this road trip from Boston to Memphis without ever having been to Memphis. So it was the first place I went, you know, was Memphis. And I went there 3 times over the course of writing it. I went to Graceland twice. I did the road trip once. So it was all a sort of a discovery process for me. So the creation of setting was, you know, through a lot of research in my case, and it being my first novel, I was really sort of obsessive about research because I was afraid I would be in audiences like this and people would say, well, you know, you can't go out of the Peabody Hotel and turn right and be on B.B. King Boulevard because that's not going to work. Because there are people who read like that, you know, they like to
I
pick
did
out.
notice that.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, I talked my way into everything. And when I was in Memphis, I talked my way into a senator's office. I talked my way into, you know, a jail cell, you know, or tried to talk my way into a jail cell. I didn't get all the way. The guy, you know, the policeman there wouldn't believe that I was a writer. I kept saying, you know, so what would a character have to do to be arrested at the Peabody Hotel and taken here? And he was like, well, where's your friend now? Like, no. I'm a writer and I'm making this up, and I just wanted to know if, you know, where would somebody be brought if they're, well, you can look on the board and see where he is downstairs, and if, you know, he was not buying any of it. And he could, you know, I think there are probably good reasons that he wasn't buying any of it. He probably hears a lot of interesting stories, but finally he did describe it. He wouldn't let me in a jail cell, but he described a jail cell for me. All of which, I'm sorry, I digress, but it was a lot of research for me and sort of just and developing the setting from the details of all that being there and experiencing it.
That sounds very cool. I will also recommend to the other novelists in the room to do what you did and what I didn't. But I have a friend who's keeps going to Turks and Caicos because her book is set there. Like, hello, why didn't I think of that? Write it off.
Greece. I'm looking at my husband right now. Greece. I think a book set in Greece
I
would
think
be.
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have that similarity for our next books.
Twins.
It is also fun to say, I'm a writer, and then just be really nosy and ask people questions that you deep down just want to know the answers.
Definitely.
Yeah, that'll tell you a lot. One last question, is that okay? Because, yes, go ahead.
This is just a little one. I'm always wondering when I read a book, the names that you give characters. If you really put thought into them, if they just come. For example, I haven't read your books yet. One is Hope, and Adam being the first man, whatever it is. I just wondered if you had any, if there were reasons for those names, or if they come to you at night.
Yeah, there was actually a particular reason for Hope, and I won't spoil it because if you read the book, but yes, but I do. I mean, I don't know about you, Adrienne, but the name has to feel right to me. You know, it's like I try on different names for characters until I get one that just feels right. And as a writer too, you have to also be very conscious about making your names different enough, because I've read novels where, you know, there's 5 characters that are, yeah, oh yeah, you know, there are little rules that, you know, you shouldn't really have 2 main characters starting with the first letter, because it's the same first letter, Or, I remember reading a novel where everybody was like, Bob, Dave, first one-syllable names, and it was like, could somebody be Alexander, or somebody, or whatever? Could somebody be Melissa?
In the case of my characters for this book, I actually, when I realized it was sort of centered on sibling rivalry, I remember thinking, that I should go to the original sibling rivalry story of all times of Cain and Abel, and I thought I was going to figure out so much with that. Yes, exactly. I thought I was going to figure out so much from that story, and of course, that story's like 2 sentences long, and there is nothing to it. It's like you don't find out anything about character motivation. It's they give gifts to the father. God likes Abel's better than Cain. Cain gets mad, stabs Abel. Anyway, when I realized what I did take away from that fable or biblical story was that I wanted to move towards an event where gifts would be given that would reveal much. And so I actually just took on Ken and Abby originally, just to sort of be almost place markers in my head, and then I got kind of attached to it. But when I handed the book in, I did say to my editor, I think probably I need to change these names because they're too obvious, and she was like, I didn't notice, and no one in the publishing house had noticed, so I was like, okay then.
I just got it just now.
Yeah,
too.
So,
I can't imagine Ken not being Ken.
yeah,
Ken is
he's
Ken.
Ken.
Yeah,
He's Ken.
he's definitely Ken. Well, on that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. This was such a pleasure. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you to the Carey Library Foundation for making the Carey Literary Cafe possible. Happy Carybokaflod.
Nice
Happy
saying
holidays.
that.
I know. Did I Google how to pronounce it? Yes, I did.
Thank you for moderating too.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. Thank you, everyone.